Plaintiff Matthew Dominguez dated the defendant, and while they were together, the defendant was addicted to heroin. Matthew claims he did everything he could to help the defendant over the years, and he's suing him today for attorney fees, the cost of a car, and rent. Defendant Stephen Balfe says his relationship with Matthew was toxic because Stephen was broke, using heroin, and in and out of jail and rehab, and Matthew was a raging alcoholic. Stephen claims after they broke up, he robbed 3 banks and went to prison, and that's when he got his life together. Stephen denies owing Matthew for anything.
Start with you.
I met Mr. Balfe a little over 10 years ago. At first we began dating. Everything seemed pretty common. I liked him. At the time, over the years, he developed, or I don't know if he developed it per se, but he had a substantial heroin addiction.
How long did you all date?
Early 2006.
10 years ago, so that means from 06 until when?
October of 2011.
Okay. And when did you observe his heroin addiction begin?
I kind of always observed it, but there were small signs.
So he started out? When you all started, you believe he was on heroin?
Looking back, yes.
Okay. And what was your experience like in your relationship?
It was overall pretty good at first.
Okay.
I didn't take heroin 101, so I didn't know what specific signs to look for at first. Over the course of the years, I did a lot of things for him. He would get into a jam, I would help, I would do everything I could to get him out of it.
Defendant Stephen Balfe dated the plaintiff, and he claims after they broke up, he hit rock bottom, robbed 3 banks, and went to prison.
You give me some background on your relationship, and then we'll get into the issues you're suing him about. Sir?
For sure. Mr. Dominguez and I started dating roughly around 2006, lasted till about 2011-ish, give or take. From the start, our relationship was utterly toxic. He knew I was an out-of-control drug addict. I knew he was a raging alcoholic. I would be broke, high all the time, in and out of court. He would get blackout drunk, wake up at random places in the city.
Is this true?
For the most part, as far as me believing, I don't believe it was toxic. I had a lot.
That's enough. Go ahead.
It was toxic. I was in and out of jail, in and out of rehab, constantly broke. He was constantly waking up in his car.
How many times did you go to rehab?
A few. Let's say like 3 or 4 for like small little stints. I'm not like full out blown rehab.
How long?
3 days, 5 days, sometimes a week.
Just detox.
Just detox.
Rehab.
Just detox. It was probation violations.
Okay. You didn't voluntarily go to.
Oh no, none of it was ever voluntary. Okay. Like I never wanted to stop doing what I was doing.
Did you stop?
Did I? Absolutely, I did.
How did you stop?
How did I stop? I stopped the day I got arrested.
But you've been arrested a few times, but what happened?
No. There was a big arrest. In about 2011, Matt and I pretty much severed ties, went about our separate ways. I spiraled out of control. I was bouncing around, sleeping on couches. I was unemployed. I had pretty much nothing to my name. He helped me out when he could help me out. Friends helped me out when they could help me out. I ended up watching a news report about some guy in the city robbing banks with a Post-it note. So I was at the end of my rope. I was sleeping on some lady's couch, and I was like, something has to give. So I figured I would try it. I would either end up in a rehab that I would pay for, one of those disappear, start a new life things, or I'd end up in a prison boot camp. Either way, something had to give. And I didn't go to rehab, so I went to prison instead.
What'd you do?
What I do, I took a little yellow Post-it note into a bank, and I walked out with a handful of cash, and then did it again, and again. And
how many times?
3.
How much time did they give you in prison?
I did 5.5 years.
When you came out, you've been clean since then?
I've been clean since the day I got arrested.
Good. All right. Good to hear that. How does he owe you, sir?
Over the years, there were quite a few times that I helped him out, and a few times that he put me in harm's way. So the first of which is he got me into a car accident. We were driving home from a party. I was sleeping in the passenger seat. All of a sudden, I get woken up. Matt switched seats with me. Okay. I'm under the impression he's getting a ticket of some sort. You know, I have my military ID, which I was enlisted at the time. You know, I know how to speak to law enforcement a little bit better, and I believe he had a suspended license at the time as well. So just coming to, I switched seats. His Jeep is smoking. Some poor woman's Chrysler is totaled. I get out of the vehicle not knowing what had even happened. I panicked. I took off. I was worried that I would get in trouble with the military. I ended up spending $1,500 on an attorney to get me out of that, which you know, who does that? And another instance, I bought him a vehicle in which he was driving a Honda Civic with a hole in the floor and like tires down to the cords, and I think it was like at least 6 or 7 different colors. He needed something better. You know, he needed to be a little bit more heroin chic, I suppose. So found him a 94
Heroin
Honda.
chic, is that what you said?
Well, a little more stylish, I suppose, if you're gonna.
Go ahead.
Which you know, throughout those years, you know, he would get kicked out if I found evidence of it. He would clean up. He made attempts to. I'd let him back in the house. But even during those times, you know, to say things were toxic, you know, I still picked him up from work.
All right, let's get back to the amounts, though. The cost of this car you gave him, is that what you're saying?
I purchased the car. He was to pay me back in allotments.
How much?
$1,350.
And the rent, what is that for?
The rent was 2 months of non-paying his half. That comes out to $830 total. So $415.
When?
2 months. That was early, I believe, 2009.
Defendant Stephen Balfe dated the plaintiff, and he claims after they broke up, he hit rock bottom, robbed 3 banks, and went to prison.
$1,500 for the car, sir. Do you owe him that? He's saying because he jumped in the other seat that you should pay his attorney fees.
That was spun epically. No, we were returning from a New Year's Eve party. The accident was on New Year's Eve. 3 o'clock in the morning, we're both plastered. He was passed out in the passenger seat. I was nodding out in the driver's seat. Rear-ended some lady. We got out, made sure the lady was fine, got back into the
Oh, that's
Jeep.
not true. I was
Let
sleeping.
him finish. You gave your side. Go ahead.
Once we hit, he was very much awake. But no, we got back into the Jeep, and what he said about the military, he used to use that as his privilege. One of those, I'm young, white, in the Army, I can't be touched. So it was one of those, hey, jump in my seat, and we took off. He ends up dropping me back off at the house.
I got it covered for who I am. I'm military man.
It's one of those, I got this, don't worry about it, I can get out of this. He
And
kind
he
of
did say
he kind
because
of
you
mentioned
think
that
you
while
know
he
how
was.
to talk to law enforcement.
It was spun nicely. But yeah, he drops me off at the house and goes to ditch the Jeep. Cops show up because when he drops me off, he backs his car out the driveway, leaves it running in the middle of the street. Cops show up. The lady's like, yeah, that was him. They arrest me for obstruction of justice. They arrest him for leaving the scene of an accident. Never once did he tell the cops that he switched seats. He said he would willingly take the weight for it. I didn't ask him to do it. He went to court, pled guilty.
So tell me about the, and he went and pled guilty. And the cost of the car, $1,500. That was, he said, he purchased for you and you were to repay him.
For sure. He had a job where he flipped Hondas online. In a given month, he'd flip 10 or 15 cars, buy them for a few $100, sell them for a few $1,000. I didn't have a car at the time. I had the multicolored Civic that he's talking about. And his comment was, hey, just take this one. He gave me the car. The title was actually put in.
And that was when approximately?
That was
2011?
No, it was prior.
that was mid 2010.
So when did he begin asking for money for payment? This
For the car?
is 6 years later.
Never,
Yeah.
not once did he ask me. When he kicked me out of the house,
When was that?
he packed the car. Late
When-
2010, early
Sir,
2011.
why are you just now asking for money for this car?
He still owed me money for the vehicle, and I don't remember helping him pack the vehicle. There were 2 instances in which he would make up small arguments to avoid paying rent, and he would flee. The vehicle I actually bought so he would be safer. And yes, I did buy and sell Hondas, but that was a vehicle that I purchased with him. We had looked at 10 of them with him that week.
You said something about to be safer.
Yeah, the Civic was falling apart. He needed a newer car. We agreed on payment terms. He couldn't afford the vehicle at one. He didn't have, you know,
When was he
$1,300.
to repay you? What was the agreed upon time?
Within 6 months.
Okay. So when that 7th month came, what did you do?
Basically, the car had already been sold by that point. The reason I had no problem buying the car and taking payments on it is because he was working for the company that he had worked for the majority of the time that we had been together.
It's been 6.5 years. Why are you just now coming in here?
Because he never had an avenue of being able to collect. I would never be able to go after. Anybody can sue anyone for anything, but I would never have been able to get anything out of him. He never would have paid anything.
That's why you get judgments.
And then he was.
And then you get a judgment, and then you can collect on that judgment when they do get something. He obviously has something now.
Well, for the last 5 years, he's been in prison, so it's kind of hard to sue somebody for.
You can get a judgment. You can get a judgment. Like folks think when they're in prison, they don't have to pay child support. It's not true. When they come home, they owe that child support. Can't go to jail and avoid child support.
Defendant Stephen Wolf dated the plaintiff, and he claims after they broke up, he hit rock bottom, robbed 3 banks, and went to prison.
Why do you think he's waiting this long to sue you for these other 2 things?
The entire time that I was incarcerated, I had no communication with him whatsoever. The day I got arrested, I severed ties. One of those, my past is done, it's over with. So I don't communicate with him at all. He sends me letters every month. Never misses a birthday, never misses a Christmas, everything. Get all this mail. One of these postcards actually outed me as a homosexual in prison and got passed around the yard. It was drunk. You could tell by the scribbling on it. He sent me a letter while I was still in the halfway house, let's say 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. And he asked if I would take the opportunity to meet him for coffee and get closure. I went, I met him for coffee. I explained to him that I've been sober, that I wanted to just sever ties, and I wanted closure to be closure, and I wanted to move on with my new life. 2 weeks later, I get a text that says, "I'm going to sue you, the sympathy is over."
Okay. Did it happen like that, sir?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Your claim is this. Your claim is dismissed. You're beyond the statute of limitations. Have a good day.
He has a lot of searching to do. He is a scary person.
I'm good. I just wanted closure. I wanted it to be done, and hopefully it's done. So here's to the future.